Welcome to Redefining Medicine, an intimate and personalized program that illustrates a different side of the practice of medicine. Our in-depth conversations will focus on the physicians and practitioners who are redefining medicine through their integrative, functional, and holistic approach to health and well-being.
Welcome to Redefining Medicine. Today we're interviewing Svetlana Dubinsky. She's a healthcare disruptor. She will talk to us about how your thoughts, the way you feel, the way you express your thoughts, and the way you're changing your life affects outcome, and how you can get sick from your thoughts and from not listening to what your gut is telling you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for joining us, and tell us all about it.
I've spent my entire life watching this industry go through every topsy-turvy initiative, regulatory requirement, everything you can think of. And about 10 years ago, my son, who was in first grade at the time, was diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder. And that later morphed into ADHD. And it was a very difficult time for us during his elementary school years. And as most practitioners know, for an ADHD kid, it's very important for the parent to create a home environment such that they're loved and supported and able to thrive. But what happens when that parent is in survival? What happens when that parent is living under enormous stress, which I was? My career at that point was skyrocketing. I was a strategist working with leaders across some of the largest and most well-renowned health systems in the world. And if you know what's been happening in healthcare, about 10 years ago, it was a very turbulent time. There were a lot of changes happening. And so I had this front row seat to patient deaths, physician suicides, and if they didn't take that path, it was either drug addiction, mental health, just the burnout and exhaustion at that time. Health systems were acquiring private practices like candy. It was rampant. And physicians were being turned into hospitalists. There was so much turmoil happening, and it resulted in the lack of quality in our patient outcomes. Patient deaths. It's no wonder that when you are in that level of burnout and exhaustion and overwhelm, you make mistakes. And the medical errors that contributed to faulty outcomes or medical deaths, it's actually higher now than it was in 2001 when the Institute of Medicine first published rang the alarm bell on medical errors contributing to patient deaths or medical errors.
Right, well, before COVID, number 3 in medical errors was the cause of death for everybody in the United States. So this has been, you're right, it's been a really horrible time that has not improved. So tell me what you're doing to improve it. What happened to you?
Well, you can imagine this left me feeling very powerless, hopeless. I had shame and guilt because nothing that I could do could help the situation. It really left me feeling very, very, very distraught. Meanwhile, at home, turning to the conventional model to help treat my son,
right,
there was more shame, more guilt, more powerless. So I was bookended with this survival, and it started morphing into one condition after another. First it was Lyme, then it was mold resistance, then my hips had to be replaced. Then the appendix burst, and when the appendix burst, I showed no symptoms because my immune system had been so distraught. It wasn't giving me the temperature, and they sent me home.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And 3 weeks later, I showed back up, and thank God I did.
You're alive. You're lucky you're alive.
I'm lucky because it had turned gangrene, and you know the rest. And it was about that time that I found the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza. And everything changed for me and my son. We started implementing the tools and techniques which taught us how to use our own internal machinery and capability, how our thoughts and our emotional states were really creating all these health events. And one by one, we started improving. By that point, I was taking about 23 different supplements, my son about 12. Everything stopped because we learned how to control our emotional state. And
Explain to me how. How did you do it? What
with
were
our
you
thoughts.
specifically doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you change the way you thought?
Well, meditation was a big part of it, but it's really the work of the eyes open. You see, our thoughts lead us to make choices, and those choices lead us to act in certain ways, which then produce experiences, and the end product of any experience is an emotion. So if we think the same way, if we act the same way, if we feel the same way, we are neurochemically and epigenetically conditioning our body to those depleting emotions. And there is a chemical continuity for each of those survival emotions that down-regulate our genes and create disease. So our thoughts are literally making us sick.
Right. So if it is like, if you're doing what you're doing, you keep on doing what you're doing, you're gonna keep on getting what you're getting. So how do you change it?
That's right. You've got to catch yourself and disrupt that chemical continuity. And it's very uncomfortable.
So tell us how.
You have to think greater than how you feel. Because when you catch yourself in one of those emotional states and you understand the belief or the thought that got you there, and you make a choice, a new choice, to have a new thought, you've got to feel those elevated emotions. You've got to sit and settle your body down while it's going through that disruption of the chemical continuity. But when you do, there's a liberation of energy. And now you're upregulating that same genetic expression. And that's how we heal and change our lives. And it's not just from medical conditions. Our life can change. You see, our personality creates our personal reality.
Right.
And our personality is made up of how we think, how we act, and how we feel. So if we want to create a new personal reality, whether it's health or a new life, like what I just stepped into. And
so tell us what you stepped into, because I think that's amazing.
yeah, during COVID, I had this amazing opportunity to be trained and certified by Dr. Joe to deliver this work to providers, their patients, and their families. And so now it's become my purpose to join hundreds and thousands of other practitioners and providers who want to disrupt this current medical model of ours that's killing patients and killing our caregivers. And so I have made it my personal mission. I quit my job, sold my house, went all in to do this full time. And now I work with practitioners and health systems to teach them this amazing work that we don't have to live in burnout and exhaustion. The environment may not change. We may be going from one pandemic to the other pandemic. There's going to be more regulatory demands. There's going to be more revenue growth initiatives. Pick an NCQH, AHRQ, documentation requirements. That probably will never change. What can change?
You.
You. That's all that
But
can
that might change, because if you change and I change and everybody else changes, we will force the change.
That's the hope. One of the process that I go through with health systems is while we help heal the front line, the thousands of caregivers who are in such despair and burnout, I work with the leadership teams to help them get out of their own survival. Because when we're in a fight or flight, we can't see impossibility. We're problem-oriented. They can't see the very possibilities that are already there, the solutions to the very problems they're trying to solve.
I think what's really important to understand and realize is that you are closing the session, which is the first session on pediatrics that we have at A4M, that is actually integrating the whole idea of pediatrics as part of the continuum of health. And what you're doing is you're actually augmenting the idea of health and the importance of health, and for which I thank you.
You know, this session, I've been lucky enough to sit in on most of the sessions, and just about every speaker brought up how the emotional quotient is so important, mental health, anxiety. And so I'm just so honored to have the opportunity to share a few of the tools and techniques that we use in our program so that they can experience it for themselves and really feel even more confident and more empowered to bring this into their practice.
Beautiful. And I think what you're doing is amazing. And we thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us what you have found.